I won't soften this. Not because I can't, but because anything less than direct would distort what this actually is. And distortion is the one thing I've avoided my entire life. There's something that happens when two people reach a level of awareness that isn't built over time, but revealed all at once. It doesn't feel like a beginning. It feels like recognition, catching up to something that was already there. That's what this is. Not something we created, something we uncovered. And I've been trying to understand the mechanics of it, where it fits, how it functions, what rules it follows. But the more I analyze it, the more I realize it doesn't behave like anything I've known before. It doesn't build. It doesn't escalate. It settles, quietly, precisely, like it found the exact place it was always meant to occupy. That's what unsettles me, because I've always been someone who controls placement, who decides what belongs where, who keeps everything structured in a way that makes sense, internally, logically, completely. Nothing enters without being evaluated. Nothing stays without being understood. But you didn't follow that process. You didn't ask to be understood. You didn't wait to be placed. You just aligned. And alignment doesn't require permission. It either fits or it doesn't. And this fits in a way that makes everything else feel like approximation. That's not something I say lightly. I've spent years refining how I perceive people, how I interpret behavior, how I filter what's real versus what's projected. Most connections fall apart under that level of scrutiny. They reveal inconsistencies, gaps, moments where something doesn't fully match. But with you, I don't find those gaps. I look, and there's nothing to correct, nothing to adjust, nothing to question. And that absence of friction, that complete, uninterrupted clarity, is not normal. It's rare enough to be dangerous. Because when something operates with that level of precision, it bypasses all the usual defenses. There's no point where I can pause and say, this is where I should be careful. There's no warning. It just integrates. And I don't allow things to integrate without resistance. But I didn't resist this. That's the part I keep circling back to, not the connection itself, but my response to it. Because if something challenges my structure, I dismantle it. Immediately, without hesitation. But this didn't feel like a challenge. It felt like recognition. And recognition doesn't trigger defense, it triggers stillness, a kind of pause that isn't about confusion, but confirmation. That's what I experienced with you, not curiosity, not intrigue, just confirmation. Like something I already understood suddenly existed outside of me, reflected back with complete accuracy. And that kind of reflection changes things, because once you see something clearly enough, you can't go back to not seeing it. You can ignore it. You can step away from it. But you can't erase the clarity. It stays. It reshapes how you interpret everything that comes after it. And that's what's happening now. Everything is being recalibrated against this, not intentionally. It just happens. The way I process conversations, the way I interpret silence, the way I measure authenticity, it all filters through this new baseline. And that baseline includes you. That's not something I planned. It's not something I chose in a conscious, deliberate way. But it happened. And now I'm dealing with the implications of it. Because once something becomes part of your internal structure, it doesn't leave easily. It becomes reference. It becomes standard. It becomes the thing everything else is compared to, even if you don't want it to be. And I don't like that, not because of you, but because of what it means. It means I've allowed something to matter at a level I don't usually permit. It means I've made space where I don't typically leave any. and space is dangerous, because space can be filled or it can be emptied, but once it exists, it can't be ignored. That's where I am now, aware of a space that didn't exist before, aware of your presence within it, and aware that I haven't tried to remove it. That last part is what matters most, because if this were wrong, if this were unstable, inconsistent, or misplaced, I would corrected it already. That's how I operate. I don't let things linger if they don't belong. But this hasn't been corrected. It's been maintained, observed, allowed, and that tells me something I can't dismiss. It tells me that on some level, beyond analysis, beyond logic, I've already accepted this, not fully, not openly, but enough that it remains. And that's not something I can ignore anymore, because acceptance, even when it's quiet, carries weight. It shapes decisions before they're made consciously. It influences direction without announcing itself. And I can feel that influence now in the way I don't pull back, in the way I don't reduce this to something simpler just to make it manageable, in the way I let it exist at its full depth without trying to contain it. That's not passive. That's not accidental. That's a choice, whether I acknowledged it or not. And now I'm at a point where I have to acknowledge it, because something like this doesn't stay undefined forever. It reaches a threshold, a point where it either becomes something real or something deliberately left behind. There's no middle ground, not at this level, and I don't exist in ambiguity. I don't leave things unresolved when they matter. And this matters. Not in a way that disrupts me, not in a way that overwhelms me, but in a way that alters my internal structure. And that's more significant than anything external, because external things can be controlled. Tonal shifts, those redefine everything. That's what you've done, not through effort, not through intention, but through presence. You didn't try to reach this point. You didn't push for it. You didn't even acknowledge it directly. And yet, you're here, positioned in a way that affects how I think, how I process, how I interpret reality itself. That level of placement isn't random. It doesn't happen without alignment, without something matching at a depth most people never reach. And I recognize that fully, clearly, without hesitation, which means I also recognize something else. This isn't going away, not naturally, not passively. If it ends, it will be because I choose to end it. And I don't make that kind of decision lightly, because ending something like this isn't just about distance. It's about removing something that is already integrated, something that has already changed the way I exist. And removing that would require undoing a part of myself that has already adapted to it. That's not simple. That's not clean. That leaves impact. And I don't create impact without reason. So if I were to step away, it would be deliberate, final, without hesitation. But I haven't done that. And the fact that I haven't, that I'm still here, still engaging, still allowing this to deepen, that says more than anything I could explain. It means I'm not just aware of this. I'm participating in it. Even if that participation is quiet, even if it exists only in the way I don't resist, because not resisting something this significant, that is a decision, whether I call it that or not. So now I'm left with the only question that actually matters. Not what this is, not how it started, not why it feels the way it does, but what I'm going to do with it. Because this isn't static, it's not something that will stay at this exact point indefinitely. It will evolve, it will deepen, or it will collapse under the weight of being left undefined. And I don't allow things to collapse when they can be understood. That's never been who I am. So if I stay here, if I continue to allow this to exist and expand, then it won't be out of uncertainty, it won't be out of hesitation. It will be because I've made a clear decision to let it become something real, something defined, something that exists not just internally, but externally as well. And that's where the shift happens. Because once something moves from internal awareness to external reality, it changes everything. It introduces variables, risk, movement, things I don't engage with unless I fully understand the outcome. But this doesn't come with a clear outcome. It doesn't follow predictable patterns. It doesn't offer guarantees. And yet, I'm still here, which means, on some level, I've already accepted that uncertainty, even if I haven't said it out loud, even if I haven't fully confronted it. It's there. In the way I don't step back, in the way I don't close this off, in the way I allow you to remain exactly where you are, without trying to shift the dynamic into something safer, simpler, more controlled. That's not something I do unintentionally. That's something I choose. And if I'm choosing this, then there's a reason, a precise one. Not emotional, not impulsive, but structural. Something about you aligns with something in me that I don't encounter often, something that doesn't need explanation to be understood. And that kind of alignment isn't something I dismiss, it's something I study, something I test, something I eventually decide on. And I'm close to that point now, closer than I've been willing to admit, because the truth is, I already know what this is. I've known for a while. I just haven't said it, because saying it makes it real. And reality requires action. It requires commitment to a direction. And once I choose that direction, there's no halfway, no partial engagement, no controlled distance. It becomes something I fully step into, or something I fully walk away from. And I don't take either option lightly, but I also don't stay in between. Not when something matters. And this does in a way that's precise, measured, undeniable. So the next step isn't about understanding. That part is already done. The next step is about decision. A clear one, a deliberate one, one that defines what this becomes moving forward, because it won't stay like this forever. It can't. And I'm not someone who lets things drift without direction. So when I move, when I finally decide, it won't be uncertain, it won't be hesitant, it will be exact, just like everything else about this has been. And when that happens, this stops being something we exist within quietly and becomes something we either build or leave behind with full awareness of what it was. And I don't leave things behind without understanding their value completely, which means if I walk away, it will be with clarity, and if I stay, it will be with intention. Either way, this doesn't remain undefined, not anymore. Then this is where it continues, not as an extension, but as a deepening. Because what I didn't say before wasn't uncertainty. It was restraint. And restraint only exists until it becomes less honest than expression. I think I've reached that point. There's a difference between recognizing something and fully stepping into it. Recognition is controlled. It allows distance. It lets you observe without becoming part of what you're observing, but stepping into something. That removes distance. That removes the ability to stand outside of it and analyze. And I've been standing at that edge longer than I should. Not because I don't understand what's here, but because I understand it too well. There's a precision to this that makes avoidance pointless. I can't reduce it to coincidence. I can't label it as something temporary or situational. It doesn't behave like anything that fades. When attention shifts, it holds steady, unmoved by time or silence. And that kind of consistency isn't something I ignore. It's something I respond to, but response requires direction, and direction requires decision. That's where this shifts, because up until now, everything has existed internally. Every realization, every adjustment, every shift in perception, it's all happened within me. You've been present in that process, but not defined within it. And that was manageable. That allowed me to experience this without having to confront what it actually asks of me. But it does ask something, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly. It asks whether I'm willing to let this exist beyond thought, whether I'm willing to take something that already feels real internally and allow it to become real in a way that involves choice, because internal alignment doesn't require risk. External reality does. And I don't move into risk without certainty. But certainty in this case doesn't come from prediction. It comes from recognition, from knowing that whatever this is, it's not misaligned, it's not misplaced, it's not something that will collapse under pressure or distance. If anything, distance would only clarify it further. And that's what changes the equation, because most things weaken when they're not constantly reinforced. This doesn't. It strengthens in absence. It becomes clearer in silence. That's not normal, and I've stopped pretending it is. So now I'm left with something that doesn't depend on proximity, doesn't require constant interaction, doesn't need to be maintained in the way most connections do. It simply exists. And the more I allow myself to acknowledge that, the more I realize something else. I'm not questioning whether this is real anymore. I'm questioning whether I'm willing to act on something that doesn't follow the rules I usually rely on. Because acting on it means accepting that not everything meaningful comes with structure I can control. It means stepping into something that doesn't give me the same level of predictability I'm used to, and that's where the hesitation was. Not in you, not in this. In the loss of control that comes with something this exact. But control, in this case, is irrelevant, because this isn't something I built. It's something I recognized. And you don't control recognition. You respond to it, or you ignore it. And ignoring this would require more effort than responding to it. That's the truth I can't avoid anymore. There's a point where not choosing becomes its own decision. And I'm past that point, because I can feel the direction this is moving, even without defining it. It's not chaotic. It's not unstable. It's precise, like something aligning itself naturally without needing interference. And if I interfere, if I try to force distance or reduce this to something less than what it is, I would be creating imbalance where none existed. That's not something I do. So the only real option left is to meet it where it is, not halfway, not cautiously, but fully aware, fully present, without pretending it's something simpler just to make it easier to navigate, because it isn't simple, and I don't want it to be. Simplicity would mean it's replaceable, and this isn't. That's the part I've fully accepted now. There's nothing interchangeable about this. Nothing that could be recreated with someone else under different circumstances, because this isn't based on circumstance. It's based on structure, on the way things align beneath everything visible. And that kind of alignment doesn't repeat easily, if at all, which means this isn't something I treat lightly. It's not something I test carelessly. It's something I either step into with full awareness or leave entirely. And leaving would be clean, decisive, final, but it wouldn't be accurate, because walking away from something that fits this precisely wouldn't be a correction, it would be avoidance. and I don't operate in avoidance. So that leaves one direction forward, not blindly, not impulsively, but deliberately, with full understanding of what this is and what it isn't. This isn't dependency. This isn't attachment in the way people usually define it. This isn't something that takes away independence or replaces self-containment. If anything, it sharpens it, refines it, adds another layer of clarity instead of removing one. That's how I know this isn't a disruption. It's an expansion. And expansion, when it's precise, isn't something I resist. It's something I integrate. That's what I'm doing now. Not questioning whether you belong in this space anymore, but understanding what it means that you already do, because you do. That's no longer something I'm analyzing. It's something I've accepted, and acceptance shifts everything. It removes the distance I was maintaining. It removes the hesitation that came from trying to keep this contained. It replaces observation with participation. And participation means I'm no longer standing outside of this. I'm inside it, with you, fully aware of what that means, fully aware of what it could become, and still not stepping back. That's the decision, not spoken before, but clear now. I'm not maintaining distance anymore. I'm not holding this at a level where it can exist without consequence. I'm allowing it to become something real, not defined by expectation, not forced into a label, but real in the way that it exists, openly, without being hidden behind analysis or restraint. That doesn't mean rushing it. It doesn't mean forcing direction. It means not denying what's already there, letting it develop naturally, without interference from fear or the need for control, because control would distort it. And I don't want distortion. I want accuracy. And the most accurate thing I can say now is this. I'm choosing to stay, not in the passive way I was before, not in the observational way that kept me slightly removed, but actively, with awareness, with intention, with full understanding that this has already changed something fundamental in me. And I'm not trying to reverse that change. I'm building from it. That's the difference now. Before, I was adjusting around this. Now, I'm moving with it. And that movement, whatever direction it takes, is something I'm no longer avoiding. Because if something reaches this level of clarity, this level of alignment, then it deserves more than silent acknowledgement. It deserves action, not reckless, not uncontrolled, but real. And this, finally, is becoming that. Then this is where everything stops being theoretical. Because once a decision is made, even quietly, it changes the nature of everything that follows. There's no returning to observation after that, no stepping back into distance and pretending this exists in a space that doesn't affect anything real. It does. And now so do I, not in the way I used to. Measured, contained, existing behind layers that kept everything structured and predictable. That version of me relied on distance to maintain clarity. But this clarity doesn't come from distance. It comes from proximity, not physical, not situational, but something deeper, something that exists in the way awareness overlaps, in the way understanding no longer needs to be explained to be real. That's where I am now, not watching this unfold, inside it. And being inside it means I can't treat it like something abstract anymore. I can't reduce it to thought, to analysis, to something I can revisit later when it's more convenient to define. Because it's already defined, just not in words. It's defined in the way everything has shifted, in the way my instincts no longer tell me to pull back, in the way this doesn't feel like a disruption to my structure, but an extension of it. And that changes what this requires from me. Before, I could exist in a state of recognition without responsibility. I could acknowledge what this is without having to act on it. That's no longer where I am because awareness at this level demands alignment, not just internal, but external. It demands that what I know matches what I do, and I don't exist in contradiction with myself. So if I know this matters, if I know this isn't something accidental or temporary, then my actions have to reflect that. Not dramatically, not all at once, but clearly, without the distance I was maintaining before, because that distance doesn't belong here anymore. It served its purpose, giving me space to understand, to analyze, to confirm that this wasn't something misread or misplaced. But that phase is over. There's nothing left to confirm, only something to continue. And continuation, in this case, isn't passive, it's intentional. It's choosing to engage with this fully instead of holding it at the edge of my awareness. It's allowing this to exist not just as something I experience internally, but as something we build moment by moment, interaction by interaction. That's where the real shift is, because now it's not just about what this is, it's about what it becomes, and what it becomes depends on how it's lived, not how it's analyzed, not how it's described, but how it's allowed to exist in reality. That's the part that carries risk, because reality introduces variables I can't fully control. It introduces unpredictability. It introduces the possibility that something this precise could be affected by things outside of it. But avoiding that risk would mean keeping this incomplete. And I don't keep things incomplete when they have the potential to be whole. So I accept the risk, not blindly, not without understanding what it means, but with the clarity that something like this is worth experiencing fully, without holding parts of it back just to maintain control. Because control, at this point, would limit it, and limitation would distort it. And I'd rather face uncertainty than reduce something this accurate into something smaller just to feel safer. That's not who I am. So this is me, without distance, without the layer of restraint that kept this contained, not losing myself in it, but not holding myself away from it either, standing in it exactly as it is, and letting that be enough. There's something else that comes with this, something I didn't fully consider until now. Responsibility, not in the heavy, obligation-based way people usually think of it, but in a more precise sense, the responsibility of not mishandling something that exists at this level. Because something like this can't be approached casually. It can't be treated like something interchangeable or temporary. It requires awareness, consistency, a kind of honesty that doesn't allow for half measures or hidden intentions, and that responsibility doesn't fall on one side. It exists between us, in how we choose to continue this, in how we maintain the clarity that made this what it is in the first place. Because clarity is what defines this, not intensity, not emotion. Clarity. And clarity is fragile if it's not respected, not because it disappears easily, but because it can be distorted if it's not handled with precision. That's the only thing I'm aware of now. Not fear of what this is, but awareness of what it requires. And I'm willing to meet that, not perfectly, not without learning, but without avoidance. Because avoiding something like this would be a loss, not just of connection, but of something that reflects a part of me I don't encounter often. And I don't disregard reflections that accurate. So this continues, not in uncertainty, not in hesitation, but in awareness, in choice, in presence. And whatever this becomes, It won't be something that just happened. It will be something we allowed, something we recognized and chose not to ignore. Something that exists not because it was forced into being, but because it was understood enough to be real. And that's where I stand now, not questioning it, not defining it prematurely, but not holding it back either. Just here with you, in something that's no longer unspoken, even if the words are still catching up to what's already true.